Well, this is fun because now I've got somebody with another background. This is the second time this has happened. Oh, are we connection-wise again? I don't know what's going on.
Venno, it'll come back, I think.
Yeah, this is what happens when you're live, guys, right?
It's live, everybody. Never work with kids, animals, or computers or internet connections.
So all of the above, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, of course, we're talking to Adam from Hitting the Turnbuckle. We've got some stuff to talk about. I'll roll the intro and hopefully it all comes back. Adam, welcome to the show. Massive, obviously, fan of your work and stuff. We're on Thursday, mate. How's the week been?
Well, very good for me personally in terms of interview-wise. We hit TNA's Moose a couple of days ago, and he got the hit in the turnbuckle rub, and the next day found himself in NXT. I mean, I don't know if it was me or, but no, it was good. It's been a good week, man. How's yours?
Yeah, usual stuff, obviously planning and stuff like that. We just dropped, obviously, the interview date for Lucia Lee. We've got a couple more interviews, obviously, up in the pipeline. I'm not as big as, obviously, TNA. That's not what I'm saying, but they're up there.
Nah, they're good. Anyway, the interview is always good when you get a talent on. I don't know why you got me on, but the talent's always good.
It's funny because I put a post saying who wants to come on the show in 2025, and I think you obviously said us. I thought, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, always good to come on and promote everything and come on others and have that collaboration. I always find that really useful. We've got some guys at Ringside Renaissance over in the States that I've collaborated with on a few times, and it's been always a bundle of fun when you come on and collaborate with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you're big friends with a good friend of mine, Gary Joe.
The man, my AEW correspondent. Yeah, he's killing it over at the FTR page over on Facebook. For those of you that follow the Revolution, I think it's called. It used to be called Honor the Elite. I think it's just Follow the Revolution. He'll be coming on Sunday, actually, for our AEW roundup. He'll be back this week. And if you're watching, Gary Joe, hi, mate, and congratulations on your Willow Nightingale interview you've got coming up.
Wow, I mean, a little fun fact, by the way, he was the first guy ever to come on the show.
Was he really?
Yes, he was. We did Sting Theory, which we spoke to obviously a lot of wrestling fans, and he was the first guy ever to come on the show.
Wow, amazing! He's going to have a claim to fame when you, in the years to come, he'll be like, I was the first man on this podcast.
Absolutely. We're not talking about Gary Joe, mate. We're talking about obviously you. So, how did it all begin getting into the podcasting world?
I have to thank my friend Andy Burrows. So Andy and Parker Hamlet, who lives in the States, they started Hitting the Turnbuckle in April of 2022, I want to say. Andy had done, or he still does, the podcast for Washington Commanders. They were the Redskins, I think, at the point that he started it. I'd known Andy for 15 years or so. We met at a Stone Cold Steve Austin autograph signing in London's Oxford Street. I think it was that long ago I had hair. That's how I remember. I think I had hair. I can't remember. Maybe I didn't. But we met there. And then we used to keep in touch. Like we went to one of the last TNA shows over here when Hulk Hogan and that was over with Bischoff and that. They brought the lockdown cage in. And we always kept in touch. We have the same love of, we unfortunately support Tottenham as well as non-league football, and we've always kept in touch. And I never knew about the podcast, and I went to Clash in the Castle over in Wales, and he said, "Oh, I'm reviewing that on my podcast. Do you want to come on?" And I was like, "I've known you for 12 years at this point. You've got a podcast, and you've not told me." And then I went on there. That was like September of 22. And at the end of that, I just said, if you ever need any help in the future, let me know. And by the end of that year, I was on the podcast, and nearly 1,000 bits of content on YouTube later. We're here tonight.
Wow, nice. And how do you go from obviously being on the podcast as a thing to obviously doing the interview side?
It's just sometimes it's like reaching out. Like our first proper guest. I mean, Andy had done some guest interviews before I'd come on. I think obviously CJ Carter from Ignite. We'll talk more about that later. He was on a couple of times before. I want to say Alex McCarthy from Talk Sport was on, and then Andy. We got to like the back end of 2022, start of 2023, and he said, "Should we try and get a big? I say a big name. That's saying bad for everyone they've had on in between that, but." And then he messaged me and said, "Oh, by the way, Vince Russo's coming on." I was like, "Okay." And then it was quite a funny story because he was messing with Andy for the whole week. Andy was just messaging him, making sure that everything was okay. He was coming on.
Mm-hmm.
He kept going like, "What podcast? When is it? When?" And one of them times where you're just sitting there waiting because you're like, until they show up in that waiting room, that was it. And then, Vince Russo kicked it off. Russo was mine and Andy's first guest. And I think but then you just start learning things. Like I said, you do a lot of research. You try and, you obviously got your memories. Like with Vince, there was a load of different things that we could talk about, but you end up start doing research. But that's how the interview started. Andy dropping the bomb that we've got Vince Russo coming on.
Wow. I always remember the story with Jordan Browski, which was probably one of my biggest guests. I had him scheduled for, I think it was 11 o'clock my time, which is, I can't remember exactly what time that is there. And he didn't show up. And my heart was like, oh my God, he's not going to show up. But the relief I mentioned there, do you know, when he's backstage, you're like, oh my God, finally he's here. But it's just that thing of like, because obviously things happen, do you know what I mean? It's life, things happen and stuff like that. But just that relief when they're backstage, you're like, okay, here we go, game face on. Is that same for you? Obviously, when they're there.
Yeah, I think the most nervous one I had was Shane Douglas. And the reason why it wasn't because, I was worried about him. It was because it was the first interview I actually done alone. Andy and Dave, another co-host of ours, I couldn't make that particular interview. And then it was just me. And I was like, okay. And I had a load of stuff because I've watched Shane Douglas's interviews before. And I've been a big fan of the franchise anyway. But it was like, okay, it's just me. It's like a bit like Jey Uso, right? It's just me, Uso. It's just me and him, so I just had to go on my own. But that really helps for now, where I do a lot of the stuff on my own. So it gave me that kind of confidence a little bit to say, yeah, you can do this. But yeah, I'm very much the same as you. Until they get in there, though, I'm always that little thing, a bit of anxiety creeps in.
Absolutely gets me every single time. So, looking obviously through all your interviews and stuff like that, what's some of your best ones? What's some of the ones which stick out for you?
Oh man, Shane Douglas is one. Just because if you ever get a chance to interview that guy, I would recommend it. The reason being is he will literally just take you back. Like he will explain, he will tell you where the vending machine was, who was in the room, what they were wearing, where it was, what particular room they were in, and he's just so good at doing that. So he was one of the best ones for me personally. I know Dave's one was DDP. I think there was a lot of background between Dave and his father and how he got his father into wrestling by watching WCW, and it was DDP. I think that was on the TV at the time. So that one for Dave. I don't know about Andy. I'd have to ask him. A couple of others, notable Zach Knight was a big one. And I think that was a big one from a personal point because we become quite close after that interview. And then when I had my health scare, I come to Rev Pro a couple of weeks after I had heart failure. And I was talking to him on it anyway. Yeah, well, we can talk about it. I've done a podcast in the hospital bed. That's hilarious. But I had that, and then I was messaging him because I missed the first All In because of it. I didn't get discharged until the Friday. I was in Cornwall. All In was the Sunday. There was train strikes, couldn't make it anyway. So I was messaging Zach anyway, just as you do, and he was at a Rev Pro show a couple of weeks later. At the end of it, he was putting up his merchandise with Ricky Knight Jr. I was walking out and I just made eye contact with him, and he literally just dropped everything, come over, big hug, how you doing, and stuff like that. So to have him on twice was really cool, sort of like a before and after, and also before he signed with AEW and after. And the other one I can't go without saying was two others. Buff Bagwell was tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. And the first time we had Eric Bischoff on, and I'll talk about that story later because I have to thank one particular person for that, having Eric on once, let alone 3 times.
Wow, I mean, that's probably one guy as well. I'm a massive fan of his work. Do you think, obviously, when it comes to Eric Bischoff, a lot of fans are like critical for the wrong point of view? Because when you talk about experience, that guy's got it. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of them, like Russo, is the same. I mean, they're all controversial in their own way, and a lot of them are like Marmite. You love them or you hate them. Do they have controversial views? Potentially, but they're telling you how they feel, like we're telling each other how we feel about stuff. So it's whether you agree or disagree with it. And I know he's very critical of AEW. Is he too critical? Potentially. It depends on what you look at, or the way that you look at it. But I think sometimes I think him and Russo and a couple of others are misunderstood in a lot of ways. And it's always the negative that they look at. Like, you can look at some of Russo's booking in TNA, but then you got to look at the Attitude Era. And if it wasn't for him and Vince McMahon, you have to say Vince was the one that was overseeing what he was doing. But if it wasn't for Vince Russo, we wouldn't have had the stuff that we had in the WWE at that point.
Yeah, and the thing is, obviously, with Vince, I think it's like, if it were just Vince on his own, God knows what, obviously, we'd have seen in WWE.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I think it was good that he had another Vince overseeing it and making little tweaks. And I do think sometimes, some of the stuff in other promotions was questionable. But yeah, for what he done in WWE, you can't really fault it.
Absolutely not, stuff like that. So we're both obviously from the UK and stuff like that. What are your opinions, obviously, the UK scene? Because I speak to a lot of people that all say it's absolutely buzzing.
I love the UK scene. I struggle going to. I'm trying to say this in a politically correct way. I don't like going to some of the main companies just because I find it too much the same. Like, it's always, every match is always ultra competitive. Every match is strong style. I like variety in what I watch. So I like there to be tag matches, but I like it to be a bit traditional. I'm old school. I like watching, so for example, I like watching NWA, right? And yes, it's an old school program, and they do things like they would normally do back in the 80s, and a drop kick is a finisher and things like that. So I'm a bit like that. I do find the UK scene a little bit too, like, every match has to be the same. Every match has to be ultra competitive. Your champions nearly have to lose every show, which I think portrays a champion in the wrong way at the same time. But in terms of the talent on show, amazing. And there's so much amazing talent out there. And that's why now, more than ever, you're seeing big, the British talent getting signed by the likes of TNA, AEW, and the WWE because they're that good.
Absolutely incredible. What's the talent which stick out for you in the UK?
What was that, Liam? Sorry, you broke up a little bit.
So what's some, obviously, the UK talent which stick out for you? I'm talking name-wise.
Oh, UK talent. Well, obviously there's the Leon Slaters that everybody knows, but they're going to give a couple of shout outs to a couple of guys and girls that I know very well from my dealings with Ignite. We can talk about that in a bit. One of them is Aluna. She's one of the nicest people. She's actually one of the nicest people that you'll ever meet, but she works so damn hard. I don't think she gets a lot of recognition that she should do. I know she's done a Rev Pro or two or show in the past, but she's very, very, she's just so talented and so lovely. So Aluna's one. Used to be called Adonis Payne. Chris Aries is another. He's now Chris Aries. Again, he's another super talented guy. Again, I've had a lot of dealings with him. And as much as I begrudge to say this guy's name, I'm going to, because he is my current Turnbuckle champion, our championship with Ignite. And that is Mark True, who's currently touring Noah right about now. But, look, he is absolutely unbelievable in terms of what he can do in that ring. He's got a great character. His in-ring ability is second to none, hence why he's over working at Noah. And lastly, I have to say my first Turnbuckle champion, Smashing Mike, because he's the one that gave the initial, we gave the initial championship to, and I don't think there's anyone on the scene that could, well, maybe Dries could rival him with charisma, but I'd love to see that happen in the ring one day.
Yeah, incredible and stuff like that. And you mentioned the women's division as well. I mean, there's so many people, especially on the women's side of wrestling. We could have a full-blown hour, Joe, just about that.
Why is Mercedes Moné a champion over here when we've got so many great women that can do it? That would be my answer to that. That's a question for Rev Pro. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I get it. But I just feel like there is. I mean, we've got a women's championship with Apex Wrestling as well. And, you know, the whole point, I'm a stickler for it. And to be honest, it still bugs me to this day, apart from Pro Wrestling Eve, and I give them a big shout out because they're an all-women's show. I still look at cards, even some at Ignite, and I say, there's only one women's match out of 6, or there's only one women's match out of 8. The country has got so much talent. You look at Rio right now. She was training in with Natalia and TJ over in the Heart Dungeon recently, and she's a name that's been linked with potentially going over to the WWE. I know they got tryouts coming over in March, and you look at that. You look at Lizzie Evo, Alex Windsor's doing stuff with Ring of Honor, and LA Taylor has been tremendous. I've mentioned Aluna. Artemis is another one who is absolutely brilliant. And I just look at it and I still think that so much more can be done over here with the women on this scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have actually been at shows where they're not on the card. And then I will be honest, I've never been so angry, you know, when I'm actually at a show.
Yeah, I agree. There just needs to be more. And I know it's difficult because you've got to cram everybody onto a show. And I know I've sponsored, you know, me and Ignite have put on 2 shows together before. And I know how difficult it is to get everybody on that show and include imports on it as well. Not imports, but people that are not regular at Ignite, for argument's sake. And I know it's difficult, but I just think there has to be a way that we can get more women on wrestling shows over here.
100% stuff like that. You're talking about Ignite now. You sent me some stuff obviously to promote and stuff. So here we go. Obviously, the last stand in May 18, stuff like that. Aluna's on the card. Do you know what I mean? Incredible talent. Talk a little bit about this.
Well, I'll talk about the last stand first. That is coming up on May the 18th, as people can see there. Aluna and Mark. So Aluna won the #1 contendership for our championship. Mark didn't compete in February. In the last show, he decided that he didn't like the fact that we were stacking the deck against him, so he decided not to appear. So we done a #1 contenders match. It was Aluna versus Shane Hook versus Harrison Bennett, which was match of the night for about 95% of the people that were there. It was a tremendous match. So now she gets the opportunity to take on Mark. We're giving Mark what he wants, a one-on-one match in May the 18th at the last stand there. There's going to be Joe Kessler debuting. He was on the poster there as well. Joe Lando from CPF. I didn't think about those guys. CPF, incredible talent. Joe Lando, Danny Black, Maverick Mayhew, unbelievable trio. If they're not signed up within the next 18 months, I don't know what we're doing, to be quite honest. But yeah, Joe Lando's going to be there. Corey McRae returned to Ignite at the last show as well. Thankfully, decided to give Truman Roswell what he deserved on that show. But if we talk about the partnership with Ignite, it's been going on now for a couple of years. So when me and Andy got together on the podcast, we'd been doing it a while, and we were kind of sponsoring some wrestling promotions out there. There was Pro Wrestling Carnage in Wales. There was Jurassic Pro Wrestling over in Harwich. And then we decided that we were looking at doing wanted to promote, sponsor another promotion. And Andy made a reference to Ignite. I'd never been before. And we went there in April of 2023, and we got there, and instantly, and very rarely do you get this. Promoters are generally very kind of, we don't want to pull that curtain back. You can come, but you can't go with going backstage. You can't do this. You can just show up and sit down and enjoy the show, blah, blah, blah. Chris at Ignite was like, doors open, go upstairs, meet the guys, do anything, basically do what you want, conduct pre-match interviews, do what you want. And it was following that show, and myself, my girlfriend Rachel, who does a lot of the pictures at shows that we go to, everything that gets posted online is pretty much done by her. We just sat there and went, it feels like home. And in from there, we got talking to Ignite about, okay, so what do we want from this partnership or sponsorship? And it was literally, can we do something different that's kind of not been done? Although today I've seen that it is going to be done over near me, very recent, coming up actually, which was, let's put on a sponsored show. So it's going to be, we will call it, we will joint produce it, joint promote it. It will be named after hitting a turnbuckle, hence it was called Buckle Up. And it was basically Ignite's WrestleMania. which is we'll bring in talent that Ignite maybe haven't got the budget for. Like a first show, we brought in Michael Oku, Connor Mills. I'm going to forget a name and someone's going to kill me. But let's just say those two for argument's sake. We got brought in on the first show. And then on that show, it was like, right, what can we now do something different? And something different there was the Turnbuckle Championship was then born. And that come up in September of the very next show, Gold Rush, where we crowned our first champion. We sold out Buckle Up the first time. So last year, we done it again. And we managed to squeeze in about 2 extra chairs into Shedley Road in Boreham Wood, where we go. And we went a bit more crazier. We had Luke Jacobs. We had Lycos 2. Connor Mills came back. Crowley was there. G Money was at the other show as well. He was at the first show. So we went a bit more crazier. That sold out. And then this year, it was very late in the day because I'm very much not one of these guys that like, oh, it's a new year, got to think about Buckle Up. I stopped going WrestleMania because every year it turned out it was more of like, oh, it's January, better think of going WrestleMania, rather than I wanted to go. And it was getting to that thing with Buckle Up where I was like, do I really want to do it again? How can we top it? And then I got talking to Chris, and then, ultimately, it was it. Buckle Up 3 coming up this coming September. And on top of that, Ignite, probably, we wouldn't be where we are of a podcast without Ignite. They promote literally anything that we put out. They either retweet it, they comment. It could be something stupid, but they will do everything to it. We do the same as well, but without Ignite and the partnership and everything they've done for us, we certainly wouldn't be here today.
Interesting. So when it comes obviously to the thing with the title, do you get the final say obviously who the champion is and stuff like that? Or is that all Ignite?
No, we agree. It's a mutual agreement on things like that. Mutual agreement on talent. I throw names in, he throws names in, and we agree on a who. And the same with like, okay, it's going to be so-and-so's champion. And then we have an idea of who it goes to next. In fact, I don't actually know who it goes to next now. I can't remember. But ultimately, yeah, it's an agreement between both us and Ignite. A, who comes in, and B, who the champion is.
Impressive and stuff like that. So as obviously we're talking about you coming on the show, TNA is obviously a big part of obviously your channel as well. Talk about that.
TNA is just, been amazing to us. It started, they done a UK tour maybe about 18 months ago. Unfortunately, I was in Madrid. I couldn't go. We got invited to it as part of media. So we've got media pass, Andy, and that went. And then we got invited onto, I think it was Will Ospreay doing a Q&A type of thing, or a media scrum for them, because he was doing a few shows for TNA at the time. Dave went on that. And then we just kept in contact, and it's kind of things like, you got to grow your channel, you got to get the views, because look, the way when we spoke to TNA originally, it was like, look, if the Daily Star come over and want a talent, and you come on and want a talent, who are we going to choose? Clearly the Daily Star, right? Because they got the outreach and stuff. So we worked hard, we built the channel up, and eventually we get, would you like to interview the Knockouts Tag Team Champions of Decay? Well, that's a silly question. Of course, we don't really care. We'll talk we'll talk to anybody. And Dave got the fortunate one of doing that one, and I've had the fortunate one of interviewing them all since, like with Campaign Singh, Steve Macklin. I've had Eddie Edwards, Brian Myers, Eddie Edwards on his own. I'm going to miss one in a minute. And Moose, obviously, the most recent one that we done this coming week. And they've just been so good to us. Like, again, Speedball Bailey was another one. They will literally put it out there. Hitting the Turnbuckle interviewed Moose, or Hitting the Turnbuckle interviewed Macklin, and they will put it on their TNA UK tweet, and bang, everything just lights up. And sometimes we've got on the dirt sheets in America for having one of these guys on the show. Masha Slamovich, for example, was another one, and she come out, and I can't remember what she said. She said something, and they just picked up on it. And again, that's the reach that they give us. And also, I have to shout out AEW as well. Not as many talents from AEW, I will say, but we've had Lance Archer on, and we've had the man behind the music, Mikey Ruckus, on, and who knows, hopefully in the future I can announce some more from AEW. But TNA have been incredible for us and the podcast.
Absolutely. And there's one name we've spoke about as well, is Sami Callihan. I mean, I'm a massive fan of that guy. Do you know what I mean? Love his promo work. Love him in the ring. I think he's just one of those like all-round type, wrestlers.
Yeah, Sammy's great. I would love to have him on the show one day. And this TNA UK, if you are watching and you want to send Sami Callihan either my way or Liam's way, we'll both be more than happy to accommodate Callihan at any point. But it's been incredible to have those on. But yeah, Callahan's an incredible talent, and he's got his own promotion as well, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Phil Stamper, obviously works for Revolver, and he even said that Sami Callihan's so, professional when it comes to obviously the Wrestling Revolver stuff. It's just like, it's really incredible. Do you know what I mean?
It is crazy. Like you think that some people, you look at some people's characters, you're like, wow. I mean, it's like Raven. He's another one, and he's got such a great mind for wrestling. And Callahan's exactly the same in terms of his wrestling mind. And you wouldn't think, like, when you see him on TV and you see the crazy stuff he does, you're like, geez, him running a promotion, I would never see it. But obviously you see, and it's the same with, and we're not going to put these two in the same breath, but CJ Carter at Ignite, Chris Gladden, he was a wrestler as well. And when you see his character to the Chris that we see now, it's chalk and cheese. So it's the same with Sami Callihan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Stuff like that. So I want to focus a little bit more on the podcasting side and stuff like that. How much research goes into it for you when obviously you're interviewing stuff?
As much as I can fit in. It's the answer to that. I mean, it does depend. Like, with like I said, with TNA, a lot of it is we've got to make sure that we hit the notes for what they want on the interview. It's very important and respectful to the company that you give them exactly what they need. So if they want you to plug that TNA Plus app, that, by the way, download it and subscribe. You can watch TNA every week on the app, but you get things like that. But if you're doing an interview which isn't, so for example, AEW or TNA related, and you bring in somebody on, it would be research everything about them as much as you can. And I try my best not to go down the same route of career stuff. If you've got someone on there like a DDP or a Buff Bagwell, they've probably done that question so many times about how did it start and such what. So you try to be a bit different. I try and do a good 4 or 5 hour research of a big, not say big talent because that's disrespectful to everybody, but if it's like a name of someone that I was watching when I was growing up, about 4 or 5 hours of research, just try and find a little snippet of something and watch some interviews from what they've done as well, because sometimes you may be able to sort of ask a question off the back of a question that they've done, which is different to what they've already answered.
That's actually really incredible advice. And one thing I took obviously from that as well is like, it's always like, obviously you've done the research, the rest is going to be thinking, oh, he's actually just spent the time also to do the research and stuff. Because I've seen podcasts where you're like, you've not done your research at all. Do you know what I mean? And that's frustrating to watch from like me.
Yeah, it's just all about respect at the end of the day. I mean, the talent is coming on. You're using their time. Yes, you want to get... I mean, the way I look at it, and I always say it the same thing, is I don't care whether one person watches it or a million. It's technically for me more than it is anything else. And that's not being selfish. That's just, I want to interview that talent for a reason. But at the same time, the talent's given up their time to come on the podcast. Do some respect or show some respect, do some research, watch some interviews that they've done in the past to try to be a little bit different. Yes, you're going to ask us some same questions. Of course you are. It's natural, but try and be a little bit different when you interview them and show them respect and do some research for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I like as well, obviously doing podcasting, because I've done it obviously 2 years now and stuff like that, is the bigger picture. I mean, if you'd said to me 2 years ago, I'd be obviously interviewing like some great wrestlers in the UK, I'd probably laugh at you. But it's just great that obviously, one, you're learning more about yourself as well. Have you learned obviously stuff about yourself?
I've learned that I can talk much than anything else, because I do a lot of the podcasting now on my own, so I can talk a lot, which is thing. But I think for me, it was always and Dave, one of our podcast co-hosts, was a prime example of this, because I've got a lot more confidence in doing it. But I would never forget. Our colleague Dave that comes on, he was from Birmingham. I met him at WrestleMania 28. He come on the podcast a bit later after I did. And I met up with him for the first time. Me, Andy, and Dave were the same kind of thing. We hadn't seen each other in like over a decade, but we kept in touch. And Dave he was he wasn't allowed to work for a period of time because he had a problem with his back, and I met him in London it must have been about 18 months or so ago, and he was like, I heard you've got a podcast, I've seen it, I've got podcast equipment at home, I've just never been confident to do it, or I think people would take the mick out of my accent because he's from Midland, Birmingham way, and I was just like, well, look, we don't do it live. I'll ask Andy, I'll get you to come on, we can do it. If you don't like it, we won't air it, whatnot. And you look at him, I remember the first one, if you go back and watch the first one he done, I can't remember, it may have been an AEW one, and you go back to watch one of his later ones that he's done about a month or two back, the difference in what he's come along. But he's a natural at it. He just didn't know. The only funny thing I would say about Dave is he asked Eric Bischoff a question once, and it probably went on for about 10 minutes. And Eric Bischoff did pick up, and it was like, that's the longest question I've ever had in my life. But like things like that, for myself and Dave, it's like having the confidence to do it, which was the first big obstacle, I think.
Yeah, I think that's incredible and stuff like that. So, what's some people, obviously, you've not interviewed, but you'd like to interview? We're talking, obviously, in the UK and obviously bigger.
I got a pen and paper. There is still a little people on the list. I'd like to get Luke Jacobs on over here. I should have asked him when he was on my show, the show that us and Ignite put on last year. Jacobs is one. Crowley is one. I'd like to get Crowley on. Rio would definitely. We do a lot of British independent guys and girls anyway, because we do have a series called Independent Showcase, which will be coming back on in a couple of weeks. And Kian Cameron will debut on that one, on our first one. So I do like doing that. In terms of there's a lot of British talent, like Ricky Knight Jr. But I'd like to get some more promotions on as well. I know, obviously, the Knight family own WAW. I'd like to have a chat with them. We had a great chat with Cabaret. I think Cabaret have been on with you as well.
Yes, they have.
So they've had some good shows with them. So in terms of America, if we're talking realistically, which is if they're not people that are not currently signed, for argument's sake, Kurt Angle would be one I'd love to talk to. Kevin Nash, I don't think he does any apart from his own, which is fair. And a controversial one I would love to have on the podcast, Jim Cornette.
I think everyone says Jim Cornette. Even I've said Jim Cornette at one point.
He's just great. Do you know what? And again, it's the same as like a Russo and a Bischoff, right? He's very old school. I know he hates Russo, so he won't like me saying that he's very much like Russo. But they have, in terms of the people, they're chalk and cheese. Either people, they're like Marmite, they love him or they hate him. I think he's great. And I don't mind people having an opinion. It's just how people, tribalism in wrestling is a ridiculous thing that is around. And I hate it. If you don't like something, don't watch it. Why? But then don't slate it. You don't watch it, so you don't know what's going on. So just let it go. Just watch what you watch. Enjoy what you watch, and just enjoy the fact that there is wrestling companies out there, and it's not just down to one company anymore.
100%. And do you know what? That's one thing that annoys me with the fan base is like, this company's doing this and this, and it drives me mad. I see it absolute daily, and it's just like, do you know what I mean? That's one of my biggest gripes in wrestling.
It is. And the fact of the matter is, all the companies are doing the same thing, just in their own way. How many times do you see something similar, or a promo similar, or a match similar to a match that was on another, and the same people that slated the match that was, say, in AEW are the same people that are cheering it in the WWE because it was done their way, and the same people that were crapping on it because it's WWE were cheering it in AEW just because it was done their way. And they're doing the same thing. They're recycling the same thing. So, it is what it is, but just hate it. It just annoys me when people just hate on something because it is AEW or because it is WWE. It's just ridiculous.
100%. Two people, obviously, I'd like to go on my show. Like the top two people for me is Spike Trivet and Cara Noir.
Spike Trivet, do you know what? I will say this. I don't know if you'll appreciate it. He is one of the nicest people you could ever meet in your life. And I know that because he was at Ignite November against Tommy Kyle. Tommy Kyle, by the way, shout out Tommy Kyle. He's an amazing worker. I should have mentioned him earlier. What a great guy. The fact that he's not in a bigger promotion in the UK, again, no disrespect to the other promotions that he's in, is a joke. But long story short, we had a Spike on that show. And I met with him. I spoke with him out the back. He is genuinely a nice. Again, he's another one a bit like Sammy Callahan, and that the character and the person are two different people. And he's actually such a nice guy. And Cara Noir, who wouldn't want Cara Noir on their podcast?
Exactly. When I obviously started, that was the top two people at top of my list, and it always has been because, like you said, I mean, Spike, the character is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he is. The character, you know, it's just funny because sometimes they say the best characters are the ones closest to the person that you actually are. But with Spike, he's nothing like Spike Gervais, which is which you know is quite incredible when you actually speak to him and have that time with him. It's amazing.
Absolutely. So we talked about it earlier, and it kind of took me off guard a little bit. Is the health scare, man? I mean, that really has obviously shook me a little bit. I mean, talk a little bit about that. And how are you health wise now?
You wouldn't know now. That's the good thing, right? So I was unwell for about 3 months. I had an infection, couldn't get rid of it. Antibiotics wasn't working. Nothing. Stronger antibiotics weren't working. Nothing was happening. I ended up starting to try to sleep. It felt like the heart was bleeding because you could feel something dropping. It was something that was dropping. It wasn't like massively painful, but it was enough to think, oh my God, like something's going on. And I had it for ages. I ended up having like an hour and a half sleep a night, and then I was just waking up. And I was ending up sleeping in crazy positions. Like you can't see behind me now because I've got my screen up, but there's a sofa behind me. I ended up used to sleep kneeling on my sofa with a pillow and a cover. And it was like that for ages. And finally the doctor said, right, we'll go for an X-ray. And the X-ray was due the week that I got back from my parents. I went down to see my parents who live in Cornwall. And I was there for a couple of days, and girlfriend joined me on the Friday, and I still wasn't sleeping. I couldn't walk without being short of breath. I mean, that started gradually as well, actually. That started about a month or two before. I used to walk there's about a 10-minute walk between myself and the town centre where I live. And I used to get halfway, and I started getting a bit wheezy and a bit out of breath. And then it got to the point when I couldn't get to the post box at the top of the road, at the corner of the road, without becoming short of breath. So I went down to the parents, was there for a couple of days, and I thought, you know what, if I'm still bad on the Sunday, this was the Sunday of the Euro final, women's Euro final, England and Spain, I'll go into the hospital. And I was thinking, do you know what, I'll probably be in there a day and everything will be fine, and I can enjoy my holiday. They'll do what they need to do, and then I'll be done. I got in there on the Sunday. There's a place called Barncoo's Hospital in Cornwall. Went in there, and I was explaining to the nurse and the receptionist the problem, and I couldn't talk properly. I was coughing. I was struggling. She ended up pressing the alarm to send some of the nurses through, and I got through past triage. And now, me being an idiot was thinking, well, that's a touch. That's a bit of a get through there. Happy days. I'm past the first bit. And then I got in to see a nurse, and we explained the situation, and then the doctor came in and took my blood pressure. And he took the blood pressure, and he looked at the reading, and then he looked at me, and he looked back at the reading, and he said, do you mind if I ask you a question? And I was like, yeah, you're a doctor. Like, what? He was like, how have you walked into this room? And I was like, what do you, yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? And he went, your blood pressure is 236 over 138. You are technically in cardiac arrest. And yeah. And he said, you need to go to the hospital. So again, me being silly was like, yeah, my dad's outside. He can drive me to the hospital in, I can't remember where it is now. It's the Royal Cornwall Hospital. Anyway, Truro. And he was like, no, you got to go in the ambulance. And I went, no, don't worry. It's a waste of time. My dad's outside. He can take me. Don't waste an ambulance for me. And they were like, no, you could go into cardiac arrest in any moment. You should technically be in it now. You need to get to the hospital. We need to strap you up on the stretcher, get you in the ambulance and go. Then they hooked me up to all the stuff that they do. And then they said, oh, by the way, we haven't seen your medical records. Can we resuscitate you if you go into cardiac arrest? And I was like, I've got an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old that might want to see his dad again. So I would definitely say yes to that. So I got to the hospital, and the X-ray that I was meant to have when I got back, I had the next day, I think it was. And it showed that I had a load of fluid on my chest. My bottom half of my heart was enlarged. the bottom left and right chambers of my heart that should be pumping at 50, it's not a percentage, it's just a number, was pumping at 10. So what they done was they hooked me up onto IV, what's called flutamide, which makes you wee, to get some of this infection out. And I'd done a whole box of these big tubes of stuff that you have to use a different tube every time you need a wee. I'd done a whole box of that, had a MRI, had a CT, had 15 tubes of blood taken in 2 days. They still don't know what caused it. But I was literally fine 2 days. I was literally fine the next day in a lot of ways. Well, after they hooked me up, I slept. I was fine. I mean, it was difficult. So I got moved on to 3 or 4 different wards. They were great at the hospital. Don't get me wrong. They were brilliant. But I got moved on to like 3 or 4 different wards at the time. The hospital was like a respiratory ward to test all that. There was a cardiac ward, a double ward. And eventually as my girlfriend was boarding the plane, because we flew down, and that's probably what didn't help either, because it was just quicker to fly. As she was boarding to come home, I got discharged from the hospital with a load of tablets that I'm still on to this day. But they don't know what caused it. High blood pressure is one thing that's being managed, and they're still trying to find out if there is a secondary reason why I had it. But that was it. They said, wow. I went in on a Sunday and they said, if you hadn't gone in by Tuesday, you probably wouldn't be here.
Wow. Shit, man. And how are you obviously health-wise now? Are you obviously all right?
Yeah, absolutely fine now. It's really weird. I couldn't, because I never actually was in cardiac arrest. I never was like close. Like in my eyes, I was never close to death because I'm talking to you like I would normally. If you look back through some of my episodes in August of 2023, you will notice me go on like mute a lot where I was coughing and stuff like that. But I was still managing to do a podcast and everything. So in my eyes, I never really was bad in a sense. I knew something was wrong, but I was never, in my eyes, it was never serious, but it actually was.
Wow, that's really stunned me, man. I'm going to be honest with you.
It is. It's weird. It was totally weird. And again, like some of the guys at Robbie X video called me from All In. Chris from Ignite was constantly texting me, as were a lot of other guys. Chris Aries, Artemis, people that were reaching out. Mike, obviously the champion. A guy called Big Manager Blanche from Wales was texting me every day. Like I say, if there's a Raw show, and forgive me, I can't remember what date it was. It was at the back end of August. I think it was just before All In, the Raw before All In. I do a podcast and I click my background I've got there. I click it away and you can see the machines because I was crazy enough to decide to do a podcast in the hospital bed because I was bored.
Wow. Have you ever actually suffered burnout out of curiosity doing all this podcasting?
Amazingly not, no. I don't. I in fact, it's actually the total opposite. I find myself more wired after podcasts than I do tired. And we do like 6-7 podcasts a week consistently, and we still do to this day. Albeit there's been a couple of times where that's not been quite right. But yeah, I don't get burnt out. I have a day job, I have a job. I come home, I podcast, and then I go to bed. What I've started doing though, which is a bit better, is filming a lot of content to go out later on. Like I've got the Independent. So for example, Independent Showcase, which is coming back in March, it was filmed in the first couple of days of February, but it airs across March. So I don't have to worry. But no, I don't is the answer. I'm more wired after a podcast than tired.
Yeah, I've only ever suffered it once. Do you know what I mean? Because I felt like I was just literally constantly trying to book people and stuff like that. But then I realized, What am I doing? Do you know what I mean? I needed time for myself. So now it's like, there's 2 days out of the week where I just like, look, 2 days, it's my time. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like that. If a message comes through about a thingy, you just respond. But that's probably the only time I've ever had burnout.
Yeah, I think like with the podcast now is like I say if you look at it when wrestling shows are on. I mean, I haven't done a Raw review in a while actually, which is partly my bad. But I will get to what like Saturdays generally. Depending on, so I have my son every Saturday. Some Saturdays stay, some Saturdays don't. I will block pretty much that day that I will not do anything that day. If he doesn't stay and there's something happening overnight, then possibly. But generally Saturdays are my free days. Mondays occasionally, but I do try and get the brunt of my interviews done on a Monday if they're not obviously booked with TNA or booked with AEW, and you can be a bit more. Or sometimes a wrestler would just say, "I can only do this day at this time." Then I will try my best to do them on a certain day.
Yeah, I try doing them Thursday evening and stuff like that. I do obviously try doing them live and stuff, but I found that pretty quickly that that's not always going to be the case because, like I said, life happens.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And things like Sunday, like generally Sunday mornings when my boys got football, I'll be like, I won't be able to do I'm not going to do anything until I'm back home. Like with Gary Joe, for example, we'll do AEW this coming Sunday, and it'll probably go out on the Sunday. I try and get them all done on the same day, depending on if their series is. We'll do it at 5:30 my time, 10:30 his time, or I think 10:30 his time, and things like that. So, but when my son's involved, it goes on the back burner if he's here. So that's kind of my only real break from it, which I enjoy because obviously I'm with my son. But yeah, other than that, it's generally podcast all the way.
Yeah, and I like the fact you said there that you're making time, obviously, to basically live a normal life as well, because like I said, sometimes it can be draining.
Yeah, always best to have your life outside work. Like I said, I live with my girlfriend, so we will go and do stuff. We go and watch non-league football, so we're big followers of Canvey Island Football Club, so we'll go down there. We'll go and have what boyfriend again would do. We go and have date nights. We'll go and do stuff like that. We do go to a lot of wrestling shows as well. Another one quickly, RCWA was one that we go to quite a lot because it's local to us. It's like a 25-minute drive from where I live. So we'll do that. But yeah, it's very important that you still have that other life away from it. That's the key thing. And I think like Matt Cardona said it best for us. He said, if you're going to put stuff, if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it and don't stop doing it. But remember that you've got a life outside of it.
100% and stuff like that. So a few little more questions, mate. Obviously, we begin to wind down and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The question I get asked a lot is, if I want to get into podcasting, doing interviews, what advice would you give to them?
Don't ever be afraid and do it, but do your research on the person that you're interviewing. Anyone can do it. There's no reason that no one can't do it. You've just got to want to do it and just get your headset on. Trial it on yourself. Like do a recording on Zoom or whatever with just you. I mean, most of my podcasts are just me when I'm reviewing shows, but just do one and just chat rubbish or go and practice the podcast that you're doing, that you're having a guest on with just you and record it. If it makes you feel better, but don't ever be afraid to do it. But if you're interviewing someone, do your research.
100%. One of the things I always say is like, you might reach out to about 20, 30 wrestlers, but you're probably going to get one responses. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes that can come across as a bit disheartening, but it's just the nature of the beast. This is obviously what I always say.
Yeah, they got to remember although wrestling's a niche thing, there is so many wrestling podcasts, and probably a lot of the wrestlers have podcasts anyway on top of that. And they probably look at it and roll their eyes and think, not another bloody podcast that wants to interview me. So you got to remember that you're not the first person to reach out. They may have had 10, 12, 20 requests on that day even. Sometimes you'll reach out to a person, they won't respond, and then you reach out to them again a month or two down the line and they respond straight away. So don't get disheartened by the fact that you reach out to people and they don't respond or they say no. You will get the people that you want. It's just not going to happen straight away.
100% and stuff like that. So next week I've got Rob Drake on, and I'm going to ask you, have you got a question you want me to put to Rob from you?
Funnily enough, I was meant to interview Rob Drake early this year, and to be honest, time has just passed me by and I haven't got it on there. I would like you to ask him, has he done a duet with Lana Austin as part of Lana Oki?
Okay, I will put that question to him next week, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be interesting. See what he says.
Can't wait for that.
I will send you the link for that one, by the way.
Please.
So one final thing, my man, is obviously we've got all promotional stuff, so I'm going to show you the image and you get to promote it exactly how you want. So the first one is
coming soon. Gangrel to the podcast. He's currently actually over here in the UK doing all-star wrestling. Big shout out to Podstars, by the way. So these are people that I managed to get Gangrel for. So if you want to get some wrestlers on your show and you don't mind paying a fee, there you go. Reach out to them, podstars.net. And he was one of them that was on there that I've got coming, that I'm going to get on in the near future.
Awesome. This is the one obviously you spoke about.
Yeah, good old Moose, great guy. As I said, he got the turnbuckle rub on one night in WWE the next day.
This one.
Another one, podstars.net for that, man. Get yourself Big Papa Pump. He'll be on in the future as well. It's just a case of finding time to book these guys in, really. I haven't booked him in yet, but he's coming on very soon. But podstars.net for Big Papa Pump and Gangrel.
And of course, the big one, which I'm really happy about.
Yes. Now, this should be, all being well, I'd like next week, I should be recording with him. If it's a difficult, because he's in Pacific time, which is 8 hours difference to the UK. So it's a bit of a, trek for him and me. So we've got to get the timing right. But we spoke yesterday, and as far as I'm aware, I will reach out back to him on Monday, but it should be next week.
100%. So what we'll do is, obviously you mentioned Ignite, obviously it's a big part of you. We'll put the link obviously in the description of this video so fans can literally go to their website, go support them. If there's any other links as well, Adam, I'll put them all in the description of this video, mate, so the people can go straight from this video straight to check them all out for you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. I'll drop the ticket link for you for the last stand for Ignite, the one in May. Tickets are already 55% gone, so we've only announced one match. So get them quick, because I've got a feeling I know what's going on, but I can't say much because it's not been made official yet, and I wouldn't want to steal the thunder from Ignite.
Adam, hopefully you've had a blast, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, obviously, to chat to you.
Yeah, Liam, thanks for having me on. It's been great. You keep up what you're doing as well, and you'll get the people that you want on. You'll definitely get on, mate. You're a great guy, and we'll have to try and see if we go to the same show one day and meet up properly.
Absolutely. I always post it on the socials. I know where I am, so if you're ever there, mate, just hit us up, mate, and we'll obviously meet up at the show.
Definitely, Liam. That'd be great. Thank you so much for having me on, mate.
Absolutely. So one final thing for you. So every guest I interview gets to do the outro for this show. So you can say anything you want. You can promote anything you want. As long as you end it with the line, roll the outro, take it away.
What was the line? Sorry, I got to roll the outro. So is that what it was, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So everybody, look, go to Ignite, go to 96 Eventbrite, type in Ignite Wrestling Pro, they'll come up with the last stand, get on that. Follow us at HTT Buckle on X, HTT Buckle on YouTube, hitting the Turnbuckle podcast on every other social media platform. Follow Magic of Wrestling at MO Wrestling, sorry. Follow that on Instagram. Follow that on Twitter. I know that you're on there. If you're on any other platform, follow that. But Liam, it's time for you, my friend, to roll that outro.